Ready to start your journey? Whether it's your first workout or you are a seasoned athlete, Endurance for Everyone Coaching wants to work with you. Our coaching team has worked with athletes from beginners to USAT national qualifiers and are comprised of experienced runners, cyclists, and triathletes who have a passion for healthy living and have been where you are. We offer comprehensive coaching programs from weekly support to basic consultation, all designed to help you achieve your goals. If you want to take your performance to the next level, look no further than Endurance for Everyone Coaching. Go to www.teamE4E.com and click on the coaching link or send an email to teamE4E@enduranceforeveryone.com. And let's get started.
Welcome to this week's Endurance for Everyone podcast.
The following program is for entertainment purposes only. Though the hosts of this show are certified Ironman coaches, their attempts at long-course triathlons and endurance events should not be taken as an endorsement for you to do something stupid too. You should make your own bad decisions, then podcast about it. Now, let's start the show.
Hey, this is John Harris.
And this is Rob Bozovich.
And Endurance is for Everyone, and this is the Endurance for Everyone podcast. Episode 139 of the Endurance for Everyone podcast is back. I am John down here in Florida, and we are replacing Rob this week with a much better looking option up there in Pittsburgh, Miss Karen Clarke. How are you, Karen?
I'm good. How you doing?
That was a lot smoother that time, wasn't it?
Wasn't it? I know. Third time's the charm.
Yeah. See, people that are listening have no idea that we were having a snafu when we got through maybe a few minutes of recording when I realized, hey, my side's not recording. And I didn't screw it up. It wasn't my fault this time.
So you say.
It wasn't. I swear, it wasn't me.
You've only done 100 episodes. I mean, you shouldn't have it buttoned down just
Excuse
yet.
me, 139.
Oh, oops.
Not including all the other shows.
Oh.
So I am well over 300 shows by now.
Wow, that's a lot.
I never thought, when I started this, my whole thing was, I don't even like talking to people. How am I going to do a podcast?
So that's like 6 years?
Oh, well, yeah, because we do more than one a day sometimes. But yeah, it goes back at least to 2013 when I started with the first show. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you want to hear some funny shows, go find those.
Yeah, I guess relatively speaking, I haven't been listening to you for that long.
Yeah. Well, the first year was Ironman year one. And then that became back Endurance.
And I wouldn't have listened to that because I'm not.
And that's why and that's why we changed it. And that's why we
but
started.
Then I did listen. Well, when you called it Fat Slow Triathlete, I listened, and I'm not a triathlete, so there you go.
Because you thought the name was funny.
Yeah, I guess I can't even remember how I found out about your show. I think I was listening to something else and it must have gotten mentioned or something. I don't know.
That could be. We even mentioned on a few others. Vinnie Tordrich's show has talked about us, but there's a few other shows that have mentioned us. You were probably listening to some show that we had them on or something like that.
Yeah, actually, I think it was.
Yeah. So that's how it builds for everybody. So.
Oh, you know what? You had the guy that lives on fruit. I think that's who it was. One of your favorite guests, I now know.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite people. God. So how you been feeling?
I'm doing okay. I had kind of a long weekend. I have my first trail run of the year coming up on the 23rd of June. So my training pretty much peaked last week. I probably ran close to 30 miles on the weekend, which wouldn't be bad, except it was really hilly. It was like 6,000 feet of climbing or something. So I'm a little tired, but good.
Only 6,000 feet? Come on.
Yeah, I know.
I could do that out my front door.
It's actually not that easy to get a ton of elevation here in Pittsburgh. You've got to run for a decent amount of time to really get, the vertical stuff in, but it's definitely possible. Yeah.
So, well, that's a lot of climbing though in just one weekend. So you did 30 miles over the weekend. So you didn't do that at once. I'm assuming it was Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, it was the last weekend I had a 20 miler, and this weekend I had back to back. They were supposed to be 13 miles, but just where Lloyd could drop me off and pick me up, they ended up being both closer to 15.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
So how far is your race coming up?
Well, I guess as we'll get to when we talk about trail races, all distances are approximate.
That's true. That's true.
They always say it's 34 miles. It goes in opposite directions each year. So this year, because of where they can set up the start and finish, I think it's just over 35 miles. Last year it was closer to 37. So
you're in the 50K range.
Yeah. They would, if they were going to label it, they would call it a 50K. It's actually on a landmark trail here called the Rachel Carson Trail, and that just happens to be that long. So that's why the race is that long.
Yeah, that reminds me of the Barkley. I know you know the Barkley, but yeah, they call it 100 miles, but it's like 130 miles or so.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, and like I say, when we get to trails, we can talk about that a little bit. I don't think I've ever done a trail run that has been the distance that they've said it has. It's always more. So.
It's never less, right?
Never less.
Never less. It's always more.
Bonus miles for free.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but that totally screws up your so you're basing your pace and goals and everything on a certain miles and pace.
Yeah.
And then it comes out like it's 10 miles farther or 7 miles further than you think it is.
Yeah. And to put it politely, like when you've been out there for 50 miles and your GPS is telling you you're now at 52, you can get pretty pissed off.
I was going to say, it's really irritating, isn't it?
And sometimes you can even hear the people at the finish line from like miles before you get there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, not a trail race, but the race I used to do all the time, the Claremont triathlons. This is the way they do the bike run. The bike portion is actually you come right next to the finish line, and then you make a left away from the finish line. And you still
that's cruel.
Yeah, it's like, God, you see it right there. All you have to do is just turn right, and it's right there. But no, they turn you left, and that's where the hill is, the big hill.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And that's before you run.
Pay for, right, John? If it was easy, we wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, I'd still be doing it. But so the reason we talked about this before, we knew Rob was going to be out this week, so it was an opportunity to get someone else in here. And what we're talking about, Rob is up fishing in Canada, by the way.
That sounds nice.
Yeah, this is very nice. So what we wanted to talk about is that Karen, you had contacted me and said, you're getting a lot of questions about ultra runs and what they are and how do you train for them, all this stuff. And it was like deja vu because I was having to get a lot of close questions too. Mm-hmm. So we said, well, let's put a show together. Let's just, you come on the show and we're going to talk about ultra running, almost like an ultra running 101. But we will say to start off is that just because we feel a certain way doesn't mean everybody feels this way about things. So.
Yeah. And I've been doing this. It's definitely a sport that I've grown into probably more than any others that I've done. And, I've been doing this for maybe still only like 3 or 4 years. But the way that I run now is very different to the way I approached it when I very first started. So, right. I just think it will be awesome to talk to people who are maybe it's in the back of their mind and they're thinking about doing their first one and they just haven't quite dipped their toe in yet. So maybe we can encourage them.
Yeah, and I truly believe that road runners who try trail running will never go back to road running. I'm doing it because I need to get that bad taste of that last marathon out of my mouth from a few years ago. And I'm raising money for Team and Training along with it, so it's for a good cause. But when I look at it, I can't stand run. I did a charity event Saturday where we just were walking, and I was doing walk run, and the idea we were trying to do it for work, and for every 25 miles you do 2 laps, which is 1 mile. So you would okay, I'll $25 and I'll do 1 mile to raise money, to raise almost like a walkathon, I guess. But I said, well, people don't want to do it because people are lazy and they don't want to walk. But they will give money sometimes. So I put out there, I said, well, okay, you give $25 in my name and I'll do the mile for you.
Okay? That sounds risky, John.
It was. And then I realized, you know what, I got to cap this because people will give it just to get my fat ass out there.
Just to see whether you really mean it or not.
Well, yeah. So I did 9 miles. Nancy did 6. My boss actually did 10. So there was a few of us that got some miles in, but my feet are killing me today.
Yeah.
Yesterday and today, and they don't hurt like this after trail runs.
Yeah.
And
I ran my first marathon back in the early 90s. Like, this was before Oprah Winfrey ran them and everyone was running them. So these were the days where, if you ran a marathon, you ran a marathon. Yeah. And I did that, and I had such bad knee pain and just soreness from all that running. I didn't run again until probably around 2000. So, yeah.
Oh, it really made an impression on you.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the first thing I noticed, when Megan was really first talking to me about doing trail running, is the first thing I noticed is that my feet would hurt afterwards, especially after a long one, 10 miles or so, but they were fine the next day.
Yeah.
Even that night, once I put them up, I said, okay, they're fine now. Whereas, road running or even like small sprint triathlons, I would be dead for a day or two. Yeah. Just my feet hurting and my...
You hear a lot about the surface being the reason, that because, dirt is softer than asphalt or whatever you're running on. But I actually think it has more to do with how variable trails are. Every step you take is just a little different.
I agree with that. And I was going to just say the same thing, is that it's not the softness of the ground, although it is softer, but it's just the fact that you're changing it all the time.
Yes.
Like every step is different. And I think it's without that repetition of the road just hitting one, your feet are hitting the same way every step. Mm-hmm. And that's really what gets you, or at least what gets me.
Yeah.
But with the trail, it makes things sore that aren't sore on road running. My hips are always killing me after a trail run, just because you're moving around a little bit more. And I still weigh 260. I'm still a big guy. So I'm not bounding up hills and no stretch of the imagination.
Well, we can talk about this when we get to it too, but no one should really be bounding up hills. At least you're like leading.
Well, right, but you know what? There's always that little rubber person next to me that goes doing, 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 doing up the hill, and I'm throwing rocks at them.
I could well be one of those annoying people, John.
You just kind of stick out your pole a little bit as they come down.
Poles? What are they?
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. So we can start and just kind of work through it. But I guess the first question is like, what is an ultramarathon?
Yeah.
And I wrote down a couple of my thoughts, and then we can expound on that, I guess.
Yeah.
But the definition, the textbook definition of an ultramarathon is anything more than a marathon, right? Yeah. That's the textbook. But I think yes, that's technically, if you go out and run 27 miles, you've run an ultramarathon. Mm-hmm. But I think, and you can, disagree all you want, is that they really start at like 50K.
Yeah.
That seems to be the lowest end of it. So, and it progresses up from that 50K to 50 miles. 50K is about 31.7 miles or so. Then 50K, 50 miles, 100K, 100 miles, and then craziness above that.
Yeah.
Right?
Then, really, it's kind of, it dips into like a 200, a 250, and then you get really crazy.
And then you get into Megan territory.
Yeah, because then you're getting into what you would call like multi-day events. Most of the ones up to a 100-miler, they're really considered one day. If you think of, they usually give you a time limit of more than 24 hours, but you're not sleeping in between.
Right. And that's a question everybody comes up with to me, is that, well, do you sleep in between? How many days do you get to do that? And that's normal. So the other thing about ultramarathoning is that it's not all the time, but it's normally a trail run. There are,
Yeah, it normally is. I've actually done 50Ks that are all road.
Really?
That 50K distance you can get road ones. There's one here in a local park that's like a 5-mile loop and then a little 3-mile loop to get you up to 50K. So you can find 50Ks that are on road. Okay. But by far the majority tend to be on trails.
Yeah. Now the only ones I've seen down here that were like ultra marathons were on like a track, and it was like a timed event. You run around this track for 24 hours. Mm-hmm. Things like that. And that's really the only road one that I've seen, except for maybe you can't even count this because you're not doing the whole thing, but the Ragnar events that are running 250 miles, but you're splitting that up with 12 people.
And then there are roads and roads, like the Vermont 100 has some trail, but it also has a lot of back roads. So they're not like asphalt roads, but you say, trail runners would consider them roads.
Yeah, and Chris Valenti does those long runs that are on the side of the highways a lot of times too.
Yes, I have a crazy friend who's done the same one as him.
Oh my God. I just watching him. It's like, I know, I know Chris listens to this, so you'll hear this. I know it's trying to be inspiring, but I'm watching this on film, like on his Facebook Live, and I'm saying, you're giving me every reason to not do this. Because
well, this is the other thing we can talk about when we talked about it a bit before we started the show. But, there have been times in some of these long races where I've done like a loop course and I just suddenly can't stop laughing at how stupid it is.
even while you're on it, right? It's like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
I did last weekend. I don't think I've talked since then. Last weekend, Nancy and I went out to do the race that we have coming up on June 30th. And we found out very quick. It's a 7 mile loop. So they have a 7 mile, a 15 mile, 14 mile, and a 21 mile length distance through this place called Croom. We went out there and say, well, let's go do this 7 mile loop. I'm trying everywhere to find out this trail. Finally found it and loaded it in my Garmin so we didn't get lost. And after 7 miles, we looked at each other and said, okay, we're downgrading to the 7 miler. Mm-hmm. Because after 7 miles, I bonked hard at 5 miles. And I don't know why. I've never bonked like that. I have not. That's the first time she's ever seen it. I've bonked before. But it's the first time in like a year and a half that I've known her that she saw me bonk. And it's like I had no energy. And I don't know what it was. But I'm looking at it. It's like I start thinking, yes, I could do 14 miles. I can gut it out, and do 14 miles. I've done it there before. More than that. But what I start worrying about is like, okay, it's a night race. There's a time limit, and it's like, if I'm not going to, I don't want to be pulled off the trail in the middle of it,
Yeah.
So I started thinking, if I'm not going to make that in 4 hours, which I won't, then I should downgrade to the 7 and just get a good 7 in and kind of work towards it, and things like that. So, and
I love seeing everybody out on trails, and that's another cool thing about ultras and trail runs. A lot of them can be really hiker friendly and you can walk them, but I think people still need to take responsibility for at least believing that they've done the work and they can do the distance. You can't assume that someone's going to come and rescue you at an aid station.
Yeah, and that's not always the case on a trail run. There are no aid stations. So.
And even if there are, untoward things happen and people DNF all the time in ultras. I mean, they're long events and, shit happens. But, you shouldn't. I think you need to take responsibility for knowing before you start whether or not you've got a decent shot at finishing it.
Right, yeah. And I noticed that, talking about ultra running and trail running versus the other running, people are more accepting of you DNFing an ultra run or a trail run in general. Than they are in a triathlon or a marathon or a half marathon.
Yep.
It's a totally different mindset. And Megan used to tell me that all the time. If you DNF, if you have to pull out, it's no big deal. Everybody has to.
Yeah, exactly, John. And like the way I look at it is, if you're really pushing your limits and you're really pushing distance like that, there's a risk with that, and if you haven't DNF'd, you probably haven't quite pushed that limit as far as you could. How do you know you've reached it, until you fail at it? So.
Right, exactly. You don't know. Yeah, if you don't push for it, you don't know what your limit is. You'll know it when you hit it.
And there's very much a culture of that with ultra running. People are out there looking for what their limit is, or looking to try and push past what they think their limit is. So
it's not as much about beating the other guy, although there is that, in some races, but it's more about beating yourself or testing yourself and testing the trail. Yep. You're never going to beat the trail either, because,
right.
There's something else I wrote down that I can't remember the article I read it in, but the 3 rules of ultra are be ready for anything, expect the unexpected, and your race will not go as planned.
Yep. And I think there's nothing mysterious about that either, because the things you plan for, you're ready for. So it's going to be like crap that you never imagine happening.
Yeah, it's one of those. Yeah, it's one of those things like, it's always in the last place you looked. Well, of course, because you stopped looking after that.
Right.
Of course,
right. It's like, I never get blisters, and I'm 5 miles into my first 100-mile race and I've got a blister. It's like, how the hell did that happen?
What the hell? Which happened to me Saturday. I got 2, one on each foot. Yeah. And I haven't had blisters in forever. It's like, I run on a road, get blisters.
Yeah.
I run on a trail, no blisters.
So we talked a bit about the distances and like whether that they're usually on trail. And I guess I wondered, do you want to kind of touch on the kinds of courses? We talked a bit about like multi-day events like Megan just did.
Yeah, that was a crazy one.
Yeah. And then they tend to be like timed events are always a loop for obvious reasons, you know, and they're usually a short loop because they're just running as far as they can in a certain time and they want people to be able to like check in and out of a certain point, you know, within there. And then you get the old out and back ones, which I actually kind of like.
I do like the out and back ones too, because it actually gives you a target to me.
Yeah.
And Nancy kind of joked about that the other day. It's like, okay, if you're doing a 7-miler and you're 3.5 miles in, you might as well just finish it now. You can't go back now.
Exactly.
So,
and if you're as bad at me as knowing where I am on a trail or looking at landmarks, it's like a whole new course when you turn around and come back because I never remember any of it. So
right. And talk about courses. I mean, we spoke about the Barkley before, but that's what scares me about the Barkley. It's almost not the distance; it's the fact that there's no markings.
Oh,
like you're out there on your own.
Yeah, I wouldn't have a hope in hell of finding my way around.
I know.
Course.
They'd find me 10 years later. Like I'll be a mountain man out in Tennessee somewhere.
And that's why, you know, the guys, and I say guys because only guys have ever finished it, but the ones that have are scientists and, you know, like these guys are like people who are in their heads a lot and they've come up with, you know, I think that's the other thing. Ultra runners appear on the outside maybe to be pretty laid back and, you know, going with the flow, but these guys strategize. Like, you know, they've thought about what it is they want to do and how they're going to do it.
Oh, there's a few documentaries, even short ones on YouTube that you can watch, especially about the Barkley, where you see there's a lot of planning. Goes into these things. And it's like, you see that these guys have long beards and long hair, some of them. And, you know, the mountain house guys are the long haired guy. And, and they're just out there. The other one, Greg Robbins, you know, he's got a good one out there now that the Ginger Runner actually filmed him. It's just, they're great little documentaries, but they show a lot of, you know, they have like 12 what do I want to say, like storage bins for every like situation. Like if I come in 5 minutes below my pace, I'm going to use this bin.
Yes.
If not, I'm going to use this bin.
Exactly.
It's like, that's some nutty stuff, you know. And,
you know, but when you think of how the odds are stacked against them, again, I think there's this sense of you just got to try and control absolutely everything you can, you know, or at least have the illusion that you're controlling everything you can.
Well, exactly, right. And even when you have that much control, you miss it by 6 seconds.
Right.
Like he did.
And that's like Lloyd is often crude for me on longer races. And that's what, and again, you've got to be fair to the people who are helping you out. So I would have like for every single aid station, I would have a bag that was labeled and like fill this bottle up half and give me this and just empty my pack out. And here's what I'm going to put in it. You know, here are my shoes when I get to this point because I know it switches to road and, you know, all of that stuff. It just kind of, you go into it with a little bit more confidence that you don't. And you don't want to be trying to figure that stuff out on the fly in the middle of the night, you know, when you're exhausted. So.
Yeah. And I think that goes, and people, you know, you don't want to scare anybody off, but these are obviously for some seriously long distances. You know, you're not going to have that much of an issue in a 50K. You might, but you know, go ahead.
And you don't. I think the only thing that you do kind of have to realize, though, and Rob touched on this when he was talking about doing a 50K, that, you know, the other thing about trail runs as opposed to road, that the mileage distance might not seem that much, but the time on your feet can be substantially more depending on the kind of course and, you know, the terrain you're on. So, you know, that's where nutrition and some of these things, having dry socks, that kind of stuff, that might not matter. You know, if you're doing 26 miles, you could be out there 10, 12 hours doing a 50K. So. Well,
and you're also going to burn more calories, I think. I mean, just from what few that I've done, I've noticed that I can go out and do a half marathon and not get hungry at all.
Yeah.
You know, I do my hydration and stuff, but I'd never get hungry. I go out and do a 10-mile trail run and I'm starving in between it. And it's just because your body's just doing something different. It's, you know, you hate to say one thing's harder than the other. They're different, but I just think it's kind of like in triathlon, we talk about swimming. Everybody's famished after they're done swimming. Why is that? Well, your whole body's working. That's why it is. Yeah. You know, it's not just your legs. It's not just your, you know, legs like in biking or cycling or running. Your whole body's working. So and plus it lowers your body temperature. So there's things that affect that.
Yeah.
So if you're not just running, but you're also, you're weaving in and out, you're going up inclines and down inclines and kind of weaving in and out of rocks and putting your arms out to balance yourself and things like that, it's going to make you hungry.
Yeah.
So you need to know what that's like, going before you even get out there. So,
Yep.
Yeah. And I wrote down a bunch of notes. It's like how to know, what training looks like and kind of how to know when you're ready for an ultra, And I loved one thing that, I'm trying to figure out where I said this. Oh man, I'm not going to see it now. Oh, okay. And because one of the questions I always got was, what do I need if I'm a road runner or a triathlete? What do I need to do to do trail runs? Mm-hmm. And my joke is, well, if you're running, you really don't need anything.
You just need to find a trail.
Yeah, you just need to go. I think there's this idea, because that's what they see on these documentaries. They see these guys with the special shoes and the poles and the back, the backpacks or the camelbacks and all this stuff. Well, the truth is you don't really need that. You can just go out there with a pair of road shoes. It's fine.
Yep.
So,
and for most trails that people are starting out on, I wouldn't wear trail shoes on even if I had them, because a lot of ultras do this too. They'll have trail sections and they'll have road sections. So trying to wear shoes with big lugs on trails that don't need them or on roads wastes an awful lot of energy.
And
you don't get that same push off,
Right. And I've been guilty of this. I'm thinking, it's a trail run, I got to wear these.
Mm-hmm.
When actually, I could have gone away with my Asics on this trail,
Yeah. And there are actually some really good crossover road shoes. I wear a pair of Brooks shoes. I think they're called a Ghost, and they're actually a road shoe, but they have tread on them. Yeah. And I pretty much run any fast 50 that I've run in the last couple of years. I've worn those. So, if you just look for something that isn't totally flat on the bottom, it's good if it's got a little bit of tread, but usually that'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah, and they work fine. And even with the trails, the different type of trails I've noticed, like I made a mistake on the last training run that I told you about is I wore, it wasn't really a mistake. I wore a speed cross, a Salomon speed cross, which are lower on the heel. And I kept rolling my ankle. I just kept rolling. And it's like to the point one time I thought I'd actually hurt it and walked it off. So thank God, because we were out in the middle of it, I was walking back no matter what.
Yeah.
So I know.
And you raise a really good point too, John, because I think what a lot of people think about is, oh, well, I've got to have these lugs on the bottom, or my shoes have to be waterproof, or whatever it might be. What you really want to make sure of is they're fitting you really well and your heel is like stable in the shoe, because you're going to be rolling around on all kinds of stuff. So the fit, I think, is almost more important than the type of shoe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you said waterproof, that reminds me of something I told somebody is that, remember, you get, like the other pair I wear are the, now I'm not going to remember what they're called, but they're Salomons as well. I'm looking at them, but they're higher. They're like a hiking shoe. Mm-hmm. And they have Gore-Tex, so they're waterproof. Yeah. But to keep water out also keeps dampness in.
Oh, yeah. The only time I have a pair of waterproof shoes too, and the only time that I found them useful is in snow. Like if you're in snow and ice, and your feet are going to be cold. Yeah, they're awesome. But what you really want are shoes that drain really well, because you're going to get wet feet.
These do not.
Yeah, and, no, they don't. They're awful. Yeah,
they were so nice before I went to Infinitus, and ever since they just stink to high heaven. But I wear them anyway because I love them, and I just deal with it. But the sweat stays in as well.
I mean, what you really want to make sure you do is just have some decent socks. Like, make sure you've run in them before. Again, make sure they're not holding a whole lot of water around your foot. Some people swear by wearing 2 pairs of socks. Yeah. I don't know. You just got to it's trial and error. You got to try this stuff and figure out.
Yeah. What kind, do you wear a specific sock or no?
I have like 4 or 5 different pairs. Yeah, not really.
Toe socks
I have some toe socks. They're pretty good. You just got to make sure that you've got a pair of shoes that has more space in the toe box if you're going to wear toe socks, because they do take up, that much more room. Some people swear by those. Again, if you're changing your socks and you're trying to get these things on and off, I don't have the patience for them. So.
Well, that is the thing. Is like they're fine to wear if you're not going to plan on changing them.
One
Because
thing
if
that
you-
really works, and I think you've talked about this before, is there's a product called Glide, which is like a, I don't know what you call it, like a Vaseline kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you coat your feet in that, I found that way more useful than wearing double socks or changing my socks or anything like that.
Yeah, the brand I wore, it was funny because I found them. I read about them in an article and found them on Amazon and bought it. And then the same day that I got them, Megan said, try them. Try this. And I said, it's funny. I just got those in the mail. And it's called Trail Toes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is like the best product ever to me.
Yeah.
Because I used to use, back in the day when I first started running again, somebody got blisters all the time and they would slather their feet in Vaseline. Mm-hmm. So I was doing that forever. Yeah. And it did work. But I find Trail Toes just, I guess because it's a little bit more waterproof, the water kind of doesn't, stay in there.
Yeah.
That helped me. It saved me an infinitus, because it was pouring rain.
Yeah.
The whole time I was out there. But
I guess the thing to remember is like none of those things, like socks or Glide or whatever you use, will save you from shoes that just don't fit you well.
Exactly right.
And you might even want to think if you're running ultras to go up a half a size because your feet really do swell. And it's just good to have that extra space in there.
I actually go up. I wear a size 11 and my Salomons are 12s.
Yep.
Because I even thought that the 11.5 felt a little tight on me.
Yeah.
So I played it safe, and when I'm just wearing them around, it feels a little loose. But I'm telling you, by the end of a race, they feel perfect.
Yep.
And you don't realize how much your feet swell.
No.
So the other things I had besides like, what do you need? I mean, if you're going to go up, I mean and I saw this online somewhere actually, was if you're going to upgrade to like trail specific items, then shoes are one of the things you need to look at because of the trails that you're running. And then the other thing is to look at how you're going to carry hydration, a handheld water bottle, or now, the rule is in triathlon and running is that if it's an hour to an hour and a half, you don't really need anything, and I do that. If I'm going out for a 3-mile run, I don't carry anything.
Yeah.
But if I go out for a 3-mile trail run, I carry water.
Yeah.
Because it's just, like we said, it's just different. And
I would say that's probably one of the things that's changed the most from me when I very first started doing ultras to now. Like I used to carry so much crap.
you know what? It's
because you feel like you want to cover every eventuality. And what if the aid station doesn't have my specific whatever it is? And,
someone on one of those little documentaries said that is that they had this plan for nutrition and plan for water, and then by the first aid station they get to, they're eating all of the pretzels and they're eating all the drinking all the Gatorade and the Coke and the Mountain Dew and then everything else they got.
And you've sort of talked about this with body weight, but all weight counts. If you're going to be out there for 10 hours and you're lugging around a pound of water just in case you need it, that's a lot to carry on your back for that long just in case. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So the more flexible you can be too with what you eat and what you're willing to drink, and the more that you can kind of go with the flow with that, the less you have to worry about how you're going to carry it with you.
Well, that's
Having said that, I would also say, because you can be out there, it may look like aid stations are, say, every 5 miles, but 5 miles on some courses could take you 2 hours or longer. So you got to make sure you've got enough,
Yeah. And that's why I like the idea of, even though I don't, plain water is good. And they always have water. Every state station has water. Yep. So if you, we talked about this in triathlon training before, is that, if you can get to where you can take water and electrolyte tablets or salt tablets or something like that, then that's easy to carry. You just take it with you. Yeah. And they always have water available. So if you're tied to, say, Tailwind and nothing wrong with these products. I use Tailwind. I've used Gatorade. I've used Scratch. All that. All that stuff. So you can, if plain water and electrolyte pills are going to do you fine too.
Yeah.
So.
And everyone's different. I mean, I kind of have a cast iron stomach, so I can pretty much eat whatever's out there, and not everyone's like that. So for some people, it could well be worth carrying all their own stuff because they know that it's risky just to go eat and drink whatever might be at the aid station, and that's fine. And like Lloyd sweats a lot when he runs and gets cramps, so he's got to make sure he's carrying enough electrolyte stuff and enough water, way more than I would carry. because he knows he's got to mitigate, that risk for him. So,
You're right. And everybody's sweat rate is different too, but enough training and you're going to know what that is and you're going to be able to plan for that.
Yeah. And, the biggest guard against all of this stuff, honestly, is being fit enough so that you're not working at such a high intensity that, you're burning through a shitload of calories and you're sweating like God knows what,
Quite the segue right there, Miss Clarke.
Oh, good. Good.
You must have planned that.
Maybe. Did you want to talk about training, John?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. People think we planned that, but we really didn't. That was and
I really do want to talk about this because I know that, past shows and people always ask me, like, how do you train for the heat when it's cold? How do you train for the altitude when you're at sea level? How do you train for hills when you live somewhere flat? And I have one answer for all of that, but I'll let you go first.
Well, first thing I was going to do was put out some like little guidelines when you're training this way, especially for ultras, is that as far as people always ask me about how long does it take? Because you're running now 30 miles or 40 miles or 50 miles and whatever. The time commitment it's going to take more time. So be prepared for that.
Yeah.
Right. But your weekly mileage probably won't be anything more than what you're already doing. But it's those weekends that you're going to be out there 30 mile runs.
You write training plans. I have a coach who does mine for me. But what I've noticed when, I've trained for marathons with him and I've trained for ultras, and my training plans tend to be more based on time than they are on miles.
Exactly. And I do that too.
Yeah.
It depends on the person. Now, some people prefer miles and I will change to that. But if I'm given my own way of doing things, the Hansen method, for example, like Rob was using, we were testing out on his last marathon, is miles based. Well, I can figure that out. But a couple other clients I have, okay, I want you to run 2 hours. I want you out there for 2 hours. Maybe not run, but I want you out there for 2 hours.
Yeah,
things like that. So it's. But I've noticed that and I do ascribe to this, is that especially people that work during the week, it's really hard. I was always one like this. If my coach gave me, and I had a really hard time with my first coach getting her to understand this, you can't give me an 8 mile run if I'm not getting home till 7:00 at night.
Right. Especially if it's going to be on a hilly trail.
Right. Because I have, other commitments. I had family at that time, things like that. So I can't go out and run for 2 hours and get home at 10:00. I can't do it.
Yeah.
So, but for her, 8 miles was like an hour and 10.
Right.
So she didn't, you see what I mean? So she went to this, and it works. And I tend to do this too, is that if I have someone, training for a marathon or long, the weekly mileage, especially if they work. Now, if they don't work, it's a whole different thing. But if during the week, it's probably going to be like a normal training plan. But it's those weekends that they're going to get these longer runs in.
The only thing I would say, just to kind of, I guess, counter that a little bit, I think if you tend to be slower, so running 8 miles is going to take you maybe if we use us as an example, maybe that takes you twice as long as it takes me.
Right.
That also means the ultra will probably take you twice as long as it takes me. So,
exactly.
You've got to be willing to put those hours in if you're going to try and run something that's going to take you 12 hours. There's a kind of a reality check here of a time.
Absolutely. And that's when you have to be honest. And that's really sometimes when a coach comes in and says, okay, look, I mean, even not that she was arguing with me about it, but when we started looking at the Croom the Moon over Croom race on June 30th, we were signed up for the 14. We went out and did the one loop, the 7, and realized we're not going to make it in that time limit.
Yes.
So this is when the coach in me comes out and say, okay, we need to back this off to the 7.
Yes. And
instead of failing at the 14, doing the 7, knowing we could do 14 if there was no time limit.
Right.
But when you're starting at 7:00 at night and you're looking at maybe a 5-hour time that you're going to do this, that you're talking about midnight. And you're looking at the time cutoff is 11.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're already an hour past, even in the best case, because we did the 7 in 2.5 maybe.
Yeah.
So that's looking at 5 hours. And you're going to get slower.
Yeah,
you're not going to get faster. You're going to get slower.
You're probably not going to negative split an ultra race.
You're not going to negative split an ultra, right? So, and that's another thing to remember, right? You're not going to negative split an ultra.
You're really not. And one of the things that, I helped Lloyd my husband trained for his first 100 last year, and he did it only running 3 times a week. Most of his miles were on the weekend. But what we really had to think about was, I've lost my train of thought a little bit here. But he wasn't, I run 5 days a week. I have my plan. I stick to it. I'm really methodical, and I need that to get my confidence there so that I know on the day I'm going to be able to do it. Because so much of it for me is just believing it and being willing to go out, and actually do it.
Gotcha.
So you can't, it's very hard for an ultra to rely solely on weekends, because you're trying to build your long run up to something substantially more than you probably would do even for a marathon, whether it's just more time on your feet or it's actually distance. So, you can't, you're going to get injured, I think, if you try to do that. If you're a beginner and you're just relying on, adding 5 miles every week to your long run on the weekend, you can't do that unless you build up some base during the
right. And I think that's where I kind of, with some other health issues I've had pop up, I've always got something popping up. A lot of my weekly runs have been rare, if not non-existent. So I've become almost, in the past 2 months, a weekend warrior.
Yeah.
And which I really am not a fan of,
Yeah.
But
what I wouldn't want to do, though, is kind of put people off doing this. Because, back in 2015, I ran my first ultra. I wanted to run a 50-mile race. And I did that because I had come from all those road running injuries. I actually didn't think I could run 5 days a week. I just thought I would get injured if I did that. So I literally was running a long weekend run, one run during the week, but a lot of indoor cycling and, other things to get cardiovascularly fit enough to do it, because I didn't want to run super fast. I just wanted to finish it within the cutoff.
Right.
So I just needed to get my body ready. So I would go for a run, and then I would go to the gym and sit on the bike for 2 hours.
Oh, I got you. So you're just putting time in.
Yeah, and keeping my heart rate at that level and keeping my legs moving and everything moving for enough hours without actually having to go run for 6 hours on a trail.
So I'll ask you, since you do have a coach that writes a plan for you, you said, so we always run into, because every coach is different as well, right? Everybody has their own way of looking at things. So, my normal for a normal ultra run or even a marathon is usually a 20-week plan. And does he have or she, I'm assuming he's a he, but I shouldn't.
He's a he. Yeah, he's a he.
Is it a 20-week plan, or what does he go with?
We usually, I contacted him after I did my first 50-miler, because I knew at that point, I already had in my head that I wanted to do a 100-mile race. It's kind of a rite of passage when you get into ultras. Everyone wants to do 100, right? And I also knew, given my personality and the way I knew I would drastically overtrain if I tried to do that on my own. I just knew it. Yep. Yeah, I know myself well enough. So, I contacted him more because I wanted, and when I first went to him, I said to him, I want to do the minimum amount of running that I could do to be able to finish this race. And I contacted him probably about 8 months before my 100-mile race would have been. So we had, he had that long-term view to get me up to 100 miles, but he spent probably the first month or two coming up with what a sustainable base weekly running schedule would look like for me. And we settled on, I could pretty much sustain around 35 miles or so of running every week, and I would be able to recover and I wouldn't get injured. So we spent some time, just figuring that out. And then he just slowly added from there based on the runs that he knew, I had coming up and the types of trails they were and, where I lived, and kind of factored all of that in. So I think the other thing that's a little different with ultras, especially if you're aiming for a 100-mile race, and you've talked about this, doing those really long training runs on your own can be really daunting. So I also had a whole lot of races built into that schedule. Every month that year I had an ultra. So I literally did 7 ultras, and I actually did 9 ultras in 9 months.
Okay, you're kind of doing that now too, right?
Right. Yeah. Because that's the only way that I can get my head around going out and running for 10 hours. I couldn't. When Megan said she was doing all those marathons in a row, that's just mind blowing for me.
Yeah. Yeah. She's a different animal altogether, as far as mentally strong and stuff. She's, she blows me away with that kind of stuff. But
and so what I tried what I try to do, again, it's hard to work on everything all at once. So if you're going to build up to a race and you want to put training races in, you want to make sure the goals are the same for all of them. So for me, it was about, I got into the Leadville 100 lottery. So that meant instantly then I needed to be able to climb a whole bunch of hills and, we knew what that course would be like. So you want to try and stick with the same kind of goal through all the races that you're going to run. You don't want to try and run a really fast road ultra and then the next one's got 15,000 feet of climbing and then the next one's something else. So, just trying to be consistent with what the goal is. And my goal was building up distance and time on my feet. That's really what I needed.
Yeah. Well, it's funny that you said the weekly mileage of 35 because I have written down here. You ready? Mm-hmm. Weekly mileage, 20 to 30 miles.
See? Yeah.
With a minimum of 10-mile long runs.
And I've done well on that mileage. I mean, I've won a couple of 50-mile races running just that mileage. And, of course, it builds up. Last week, I think I did like 60 miles because that's my peak week. But that's really unusual for me.
Yeah, that's
and
a lot of miles.
Yeah, especially when your normal I can do week in, week out is around 35 and given, the health stuff that I've got right now. But, even last year when I was 100% healthy, I ran a couple of 50-mile races in under 10 and a half hours doing that. Mm-hmm. So, you don't have to be out there slogging out, 50, 60-mile weeks, week in, week out to do this. It's really not what it's about. Yeah.
Yeah, I also wrote down, sometimes I write stuff down and I forget where I got it from. So if somebody knows where this comes from, I'm not stealing it. That before you even start with a true training plan, that you should have at least be able to run a 10-mile run with relative ease. Nothing's easy, but be able to complete 10 miles and have at least long runs of 25 miles under your belt before you even start training. That until you get to at least the ability to do that, you're probably pushing it to even do more. But I mean, I've done that, so I know I'm good. But I think I liken it a lot to triathlon, and I keep going back to that because that's where I got started. But my biggest, and I did it with trail run with the Infinitus too, but my biggest weakness sometimes is wanting to jump up too fast.
And me too. I
wasn't ready, even though I was going to try it. I wasn't ready for that 100-miler.
And I probably shouldn't. This is actually one of the things I had written down too, because one of the things that people say is, when you're looking for your first ultra, look for something close to home, look for something that's similar to what you can run on and train on. And that's all great, but you also need something that kind of lights a fire. If you're going to be out there for hours and hours, day in, day out, you got to really want it, So,
yeah, right.
And should Leadville have been my first 100-mile attempt? No, the whole thing's above 10,000 feet, and it's like I didn't know anything about strategy. Like I look at it now, and I was so green. It was just crazy. But I was so excited, and I did not miss a single training run. And it's what I needed to really get me out there on those days.
Sometimes that does. Yeah, sometimes that does it. I mean. I wanted very badly to complete an Ironman 70.3, and I was going to get there as soon as I could. And I did complete them. I've never, DNF'd an Ironman, but it almost got to the point that it was hurting so much and becoming such a downer at times that I got tired of it.
Yeah.
And I needed to back off, and that's what I did first. And then when I started, that's when Megan, was really starting to become my coach at that point. And she said, we need to do something different, because you're focusing too much on this Ironman thing that, or 70.3 even, that you're losing the joy of it,
Yeah.
The trail running kind of brought me back around, that, this is fun. This is kind of fun. Even, it was like, there's no such thing as a bad day in the woods,
Right.
And I love it out there.
Yeah.
So.
And it's like this weekend when, Lloyd had a really big run and it was stormy and we knew the trail was going to be mud. And like I said to Lloyd, but what else would we be doing today? And we can now spend 6 hours out here. We've got a valid reason to do it.
You would get along with Nancy so well because she said the exact same thing to me. Yeah. She goes, what else would we be doing? Look where we're at.
Go to the mall? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, we did the 10K a few weeks ago just to go out and do one at one called Starkey Park that we've done a couple of races at. And started pouring on. It was the weekend. I don't know if you saw the storm coming.
Yeah.
It was the weekend of that storm. And, it was fine when we started, but mid-time, it started raining. It wasn't a torrential downpour, but there was rain and no lightning or anything. So Florida rain, and it's kind of fun.
It is. And this is the other thing people need to understand about, trail runs and ultras. They never cancel them. I mean, when they did the briefing before Leadville, and I had been out there for a couple of weeks thinking that would help me with the altitude, which it didn't. But anyways, every afternoon there would be a thunderstorm. And so they're doing the briefing, at the beginning of the race, and they're like, yeah, when you're up the top of Hope Pass, if there's lightning, you want to kind of try and huddle a little bit near the ground and just wait it out.
Yeah, you're right. Get lower than everything else.
Yeah, so you've got to go out and train in anything because who knows what the day is going to be like of the race.
That's right. It doesn't matter if it's raining. Get out there. I'll go back to Infinitus. When I was out there, now I was doing the 100 miles, so I didn't start until Saturday or Friday. So the 888s that year had been going already 7 days.
Yeah.
When I got there, the night I got there, 50-mile-an-hour winds, torrential downpour. That race didn't stop. Those guys were out there in that downpour and that 50-mile-an-hour wind running, and it was 30 degrees. Yeah. Now, they had better weather this year. I'll give them that. Like,
but again, there would have been something else. That's the other thing. When you do these long races, it's the same with a marathon, like we were talking about with Rob. It's either going to be really humid, it's going to be hot, it's going to be cold, it's going to be windy. Who knows? But there's always going to be something,
That's
and
part
I think
of it.
it is part of it. And I think that this comes back to what I said when we started talking about training. I think there's one solution to a lot of this, and that's fitness. If you've got just enough fitness to complete the race in the time you want, you've got no margin for anything to go wrong.
Right.
If you've got a little bit of extra fitness and it turns out to be a little bit more humid, you've still got a decent shot at reaching the goal.
Right. And I talked about that as far as coaching. I'm not sure if it was in a sprint or in a regular show, but I was talking about that people, and I've done it too, and I know we've all done it, we tend to focus on the race and not on the training session.
Right.
And your goal is not to worry about the race. Your goal is to worry about what's on your training session today.
Yes.
And if your training session today is 10 miles, hill repeats, whatever it is, that's what you focus on. Yep. And if you do every training session like that, the race will take care of itself.
Yes.
You'll be ready for it.
Yes.
It's about the training sessions. And I think too many times we as a group, we've all done it, focus on the race and forget about the training.
Yep.
And we do that, and I've said this myself. I know I've heard myself say it. Is that, oh my God, I struggled through this 10-mile run. How the hell am I going to do 70 miles?
Yes.
Well, the 70 miles is 5 months away.
Right.
It's one training session. Okay, so it's one training. So you had a bad training session.
Yeah.
Go to the next one. Go to the next
and
one.
I had this conversation so many times with Lloyd last year when he was getting ready for that 100. I would just keep saying to him, you don't have to run the 100-mile race today.
Right.
And when you do run the 100-mile race, you won't be starting it with the mindset you had for the 6-mile run. You're in it for 100 miles.
Right.
You're not going to go out there like a rabbit, because it's only 4 or 5 miles. It's 100. So everything will be different on the day.
Right. And it could be, you could have the most perfect run, and all your training sessions have sucked.
Yeah.
And you get out there on race day and it's 60 degrees, and it's kind of like my runner's world, last year is like, I did not expect to do a personal best by almost 40 minutes in Pennsylvania. Yeah. That had hills. I don't train.
Yeah, because if you'd really thought about it, right, you would have thought the odds were totally against you, and that's what's going to happen.
Oh, even when I was standing out there, it's too cold and I'm freezing. Yeah. And I'll go out there and I bust out. Yeah. And Croom last January, I beat my time from the year before by almost 2 hours. Yeah. So and I think there are a few things at play with that too, John. I think it's like like we said, having a good base and having the fitness so that you've got that little bit of extra leeway. But it's also experience. You've done them before. You might not even realize it, but you're that little bit more relaxed. You kind of know what's going on a little bit more. And that, because it takes energy to be anxious as well. So, yes,
the less anxious you are, the better.
Well, and I've said this before. I was like, I don't get anxious before trail runs. And I was anxious in Infinitus because 100 miles was daunting to me, but not like I do. I still get anxious with triathlons, but that swim still gets me. But even though I'm ready for it, but as far as I mean, yeah, you're right. Anxious. I've sat there and come out of the swim, and I've got myself so keyed up about the swim that I feel like I could just go down and stop right now.
Yeah.
Because I'm so tired coming out of swim. And it's not because I've actually exerted myself. It's just the tension, the stress.
And there are things about trail runs and ultras that you can do in training that can help you reduce that too. It's like, run a bit in the dark, like we said, test out nutrition, try and go on trails that maybe you're scared you might fall on, like just do it. If you fall over enough, it's not so scary anymore. Speaking from experience.
Exactly right. Well, cycling is the same way. You're always scared of falling until you fall the first time.
Yes.
Unless you really crash,
but you realize how many times you can fall and not really get that hurt.
Exactly. Sometimes falling's okay.
Yep.
As long as you're not hurt. But,
yeah.
So I wrote down 5 things to remember about running ultras. Mm-hmm. So we can talk about them. And my number one, I probably got this from somewhere else. So, things stick in my head. Number one thing, they suck, and they will hurt. You just have to understand it going in, right?
I was reading something. I think it was actually something that Lazarus Lake, the Barkley guy, said. There's two kinds of fun. There's the fun that happens right now, and then there's the fun that happens later.
Right.
There might not be a lot of fun right now, but when you've done it, man, do you look back and be glad you did.
Oh, it was the best thing in the world, right?
Yeah.
It's like boot camp sucked, but boy, that was a good time. 10 years later, I remember, oh man, remember how much fun we had in boot camp?
And it doesn't matter how fast you are or how slow you are. People have kind of said to me, man, how did you run the end of that 50 miles? You're so lucky to have legs that can do that. I'm like, they were hurting like hell.
Exactly.
I'd run the same distance as you. So, it does. It hurts. It just depends. Hurting doesn't mean that you can't still walk or run,
Right. And it's like all different degrees of suckiness,
Yes.
My 50K suckiness is nothing compared to Megan's 888K suckiness.
Right.
Whatever.
The thing I would say to people too is remember it doesn't always get worse. So, you could be halfway through a 50K and be feeling like crap. You might not feel any crappier at the end. So don't let your brain kind of get in this, if I feel like this now, how am I going to feel in another 5 miles? Maybe not any worse. Maybe not better, but not any worse.
But not any worse. There's only it's only so bad you can get, right?
And you're moving now while you feel like that, so you'll be able to move in 5 miles when you still feel like that.
Yeah, Robin said something kind of like that. If you watch that, the one on YouTube right now, the Ginger Runner filmed it, and he's kind of said that. It's like at one point in the Barkley, he was sick. Mm-hmm. And he's like, he couldn't keep anything down. He was just throwing up and he was just sick, but he kept moving. And then 5 miles later, he's like, oh, I'm fine now.
Yes, and that's actually the advantage that ultras have over, say, a marathon. There's time for things to come and go, and they will. The one thing you can count on is everything will change. You could be feeling crappy 1 minute, the next minute suddenly you're like, oh, that pain I had in my calf is not there anymore.
Yeah, second wind, baby.
It's been replaced by something else that's bothering you.
Yeah. Well, my calf doesn't hurt anymore.
Yeah, but now my knee's hurting.
Yeah. So number 2 thing I had was nutrition matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that. Number 3 was run with a partner if possible. And some people love to run alone. I know a lot of people say that, but I always find it easier if you're with somebody.
I actually love running alone. I don't even listen to
everybody's different. Yeah.
Yep. And you're always, the other nice thing about trails is you will see other people out there, and people are really friendly, and you'll leapfrog with people. You'll see all kinds of people on the trail, so you never really feel alone, especially in the shorter ultras. Yeah.
Well, you know what the problem I have, the biggest problem I have with running alone, it's the company. And so just had to throw that in there.
Yeah, wherever what do they say? Wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah, it's that saying that I work for myself, but the boss sucks. Yeah. Number 4 is hydration electrolytes, especially electrolytes.
Yeah.
And number 5 is know the course well. And that kind of goes back to Well, the good thing with the Leadville, it's like you can't just go out and run the Leadville, the course, but there's so many people that have that there's a lot of stuff out there on it.
You can find a ton of stuff on websites. Yeah, you just got to look. And the other thing that can really help you with knowing the course with ultras too is if you look at past results. Like if you're normally like a mid-pack runner, go back and look at the results from previous years and see where mid-pack runners were finishing and how long it took them.
Yeah, I do. I used to do that with triathlons.
Yeah.
So, well, I know I do this. Where would that put me?
Exactly.
Things like that. So.
And that'll give you a really good idea of what the race is really like.
Right.
Yeah.
But, and then I say, well, like we just did with Croom, is that, okay, I've run at Croom before, but I haven't run this trail.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm out there on the, on their Facebook page trying to find somebody who has a GPX file that I can upload to my Garmin.
Yep.
Finally, somebody had one. I found one, but it wasn't right. But I could tell where it was. So I went out and mapped it myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I could tell, okay, it was perfect, 7 miles. So I thought, this got to be it. So, uploaded it to my watch and just hit it, and then went out and ran it. Yeah. And this was the issue. I don't know if you heard when I was talking about this about the last triathlon I did, was I actually got into kind of an argument with other teammates, the coach of that team, and
I did listen
people.
to that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that said that no, don't go out to the course before it. That'll freak you out. Don't even get out there until the day of the race.
Yeah.
It's like, what kind of thinking is that?
I've kind of done both, to be really honest. Like sometimes this race I'm doing in a couple of weeks is so close to home, I can go train on it all the time. And, and I think that's helpful. But there have been other times where, if I know I'm going to be out doing 100K or 100 miles, I almost don't want to know what's coming up. It's like, I think I'd rather just like go for it and just see what happens.
Well, that was kind of their take. I don't want, it makes me so nervous. It'll make me more nervous if I see it. Yeah. So I just don't want to see it. And I work the opposite way. I'd rather know what's coming. Even if it's going to make me nervous, at least I know. Mm-hmm. So I need to get in that water.
And, with trails too, they're marked pretty well, but, when you're tired again, you can miss trail markers and, at least if you have some idea of where the course goes.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm a big fan of Garmin and uploading it to your watch. Cause then you can, you hit the navigation and hit courses and it's there and you say, run the course. And it'll tell you when to turn.
I have a funny story about this. Do we have time or are we running?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this whole Leadville thing, I was so excited because, I got in this lottery and I'm talking to Doug, my coach. I'm like, what do you think? He's like, you should go for it. That's awesome. So I went out there 2 weeks before and there are 3 major climbs on that course. You go out and the last climb is up this big, like 12,500 foot pass. You go down. That's the halfway point. You turn around, you go all the way back. And there's a mountain called Mount Albert, which is a 14,000 peak in Colorado before Hope Pass. That's like the second of the 3 big climbs that you're going to repeat twice. Okay. So I went out there before and I was so excited because everywhere I went, there were trailheads and there were things to climb up. And, I had done a lot of mountaineering. I've climbed like over 22,000 feet before, so I didn't think altitude would be an issue, but I thought, climb high, sleep low, right? Everyone's kind of heard of that. That's how you acclimate to altitude. You go up, you sleep low, your body kind of gets used to it. So I was trying to climb everything I could find. So it was about a week before I should have been tapering, but I decided I would go up Mount Albert and see what this thing's like.
That's a taper, right?
Yeah, I know. It's like I look at all these rookie mistakes now and I'm like, what were you thinking? So anyways, I climb up this thing. I was probably only about 500 feet from the top. So I was around 14,000 feet and I was exhausted, John, like this is, climbing a mountain. And so I'm coming down and I'm about a third of the way down and I just burst into tears. I'm sitting by this tree and I sent this text message to Doug. I'm like, I can't do this. This is ridiculous. Like I can't even go up here once and I haven't even been running and I would have to do this twice and this is just awful and how does anyone do this? I get back to the car. I get this message from him. He's like, you don't actually climb up that.
Right.
It's like the aid station's at the bottom. You go around it.
Oh my God.
It's like, didn't you look at the course?
Yeah. Obviously someone didn't know the course well.
So yeah, there are times when it's useful to at least have an idea.
That's funny. Well, see, that worked in your favor because it's not that hard.
Yeah, but then, I'm just, and then I'm kind of arguing with him. I'm like, no, it does. It goes up here.
Of course you're arguing with him because you did something.
Yeah.
You need to be right now.
Stupid, exactly.
Oh, I get it. Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's because, Leadville is not a trail that's there all the time. It's not like it's
Right.
marked all year round. So, yeah, it does. It definitely helps to have some idea of what it goes up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, honestly, if it's a trail or a race that's local and you can get to, I can see, like, if I was going to run Leadville, there's no way I can go run Leadville before Leadville,
But you actually can. You can if you know where it goes.
Well, no, but just travel wise.
Oh,
I'd have to travel.
Yeah.
So I'm running in. Oh, well, it kind of goes to that podcast you kind of pointed me at. Is like, even for Infinitus, is like, oh, how you training to climb this mountain when you live in Florida?
Right.
Things like that. So there's things you can do, but.
And, you can mitigate all of it by being a little bit fitter. I was ready to run 100 miles, but I didn't have that extra fitness and just the extra experience to be able to also cope with altitude. I was like right on the cusp of being able to do it. 2 weeks later, I went and ran one that was close to home. So I knew I could cover the distance, but I didn't have enough to mitigate, the circumstances of that race. So
Right. So, yeah, I always, not along the same line, but kind of I always joke that I could probably be as fit as I am right now. And if I was 15 pounds lighter, I'd be a 9-minute mile runner.
Mm-hmm. The other way to look at it too, John, like, you're running down there in incredible heat. So,
right.
If you found a hilly ultra that was maybe somewhere way cooler, that heat's kind of given you that extra ability to exert yourself, under those conditions, and you're just kind of replacing it, with something else.
Right. And I think that's what helped me after looking at it. That's what got me through Runner's World, is because I've been training in the heat.
Yes.
And then when it was 55 degrees or whatever it was, it felt like I was flying through there.
Yes, even though there were hills. Right,
yeah.
because your exertion was kind of equivalent. So
So I was walking up every hill. I just walked up the hill and ran down every hill and ran in on the passes. Yes. So the old joke, the Galloway method went out the window. I turned it off. I said, I'm just going to run when it's downhill and flat, and when I see a hill, I'm just going to walk up.
Yep.
And that's kind of what you do in trail for the most part too. But
absolutely. Yeah.
Except for those little rubber people, like I was telling you, they just bound up ahead of you.
But even then, relatively speaking, they're going way slower going up that hill than they were going on the flat. So everybody is going slower.
It's all relative. Yeah. But I found that that's the best use of a pole, is when they go bounding up next to you, is to kind of take that swing.
Oh, sorry. I can't see you.
Oops. And they still beat you.
Yeah. So I would say to anyone looking at an ultra or a trail race, don't be put off by where you live, or if there's a race that you just are really excited to do, don't assume you can't, just because it has some kind of condition that is not what you can train on. It's not necessarily true.
And seek out, and if it's something new, like if you've never run a trail race before, seek out somebody that has.
Yeah.
We're out here, if you're listening to the show, we're here. There's plenty of people in the Facebook group as well that are out there that have done these before and are always willing to help you.
Yeah.
That's the thing, when you find something that you really like, the even triathlons, ultra running, whatever, we always love to bring more people in to the tribe, because
the trail running definitely is like that, right? That's been your experience as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Much different. Everybody's different in different sports, The cyclists tend to be a little bit more elitist to me, but the pure cyclists.
Yeah.
But triathletes, if they're truly triathletes and not runners just doing triathlons, or cyclists they tend to be good too.
Yeah.
But trail runners and ultra runners, they're just the most friendly and open people that I've ever found.
Awesome. And again, because Leadville was an out and back, I was going up Hope Pass when the front runners had already gotten to the halfway and they were coming back down. Mm-hmm. And the guy that was leading it at the time was coming down Hope Pass. He had a pacer with him. He got off of the trail for me to go past.
Yes, and the leader did.
Yeah, and he's like, you're doing great. It's only another couple of 100 feet, and you'll be at the top. And, I'm thinking, you're in the lead. Like I was almost embarrassed, because
that's almost right.
Yeah.
Right. That's almost like the story that I say about my first one was the Crume Zoom a couple of years ago. And I was it was pouring rain, and I'd taken off my Camelback to put on my rain jacket, which I did manage to remember to bring. And I'm sitting there, and a guy comes up, and he's, beard, skinny guy, and he's standing there. He goes, "You need anything? You okay?" So yeah, just get on my jacket. And he goes, "All right." And he talks to me for about 5 minutes, then he takes off. And he's the one that won the race.
Yeah.
He won the 100-mile race.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell people. It's like, what triathlete or anybody or a marathon or any runner is going to stop
exactly
and talk to you?
And it's infectious. It makes you want to do that for somebody else.
Exactly.
So that whole feeling just kind of generates through everybody who's out there.
Right. And people that are in the lead, like you said, people in the lead getting off the trail for your slow butt to go by.
Exactly. And like you said, it's almost embarrassing when you realize who it was, right? You're
yeah.
Like, man, I held
thought
that
it was
guy up.
I was there when he came across winning. I said, "Holy crap, that was the winner!"
Yeah.
And then it's just it made a big impression on me about that whole different mindset.
And you hear this over and over again, with big races and small races, and it's always the same. It's really awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you see it when you watch the Barkley stuff and the Barkley marathons. I mean, here's two guys competing against each other and are running together until the last loop when they have to go different directions.
Yep. And it comes back to what you said, the first thing about ultras, they suck and they hurt for everybody. And so that front runner understands they hurt as much and they know that you're hurting as much. So, there's that camaraderie around that.
Yeah. Everybody's been where you are. Everybody's out there with you. Yeah. So everybody knows, what you're going through. So. Yep. So, Karen, I think this is a great discussion. Honestly, we could do this forever. To be honest. We could just keep talking for
hours.
So, well, we're going to have you back on after your race. You know that, right?
Yeah, that would be cool. I'd love to tell you how.
And I promise I'm going to get Megan on at some point to talk about that epic race that she just did.
Like we said before we started recording, we have some selfish reasons for wanting to hear, seeing as we're both maybe thinking about it next year, right, John?
Yeah, we're both, yes. Well, yeah. Anytime you fail at any race, I mean, I say fail, and I know Nancy will hit me when she hears me say that, but anytime you're not successful in something you've planned on doing, like I was, it just eats at you.
Yeah. And I think it's a bad thing because it becomes curiosity then. It's like, how can I figure it out? How could I go back and actually figure it out the next time?
So I look at next year, end of May, beginning June, I have the marathon in January, which is a good training run for it. So, I'm
thinking of coming down there in February. I think there's like that 12-hour time race that you guys have. It's hard to find up here in February that are ultras, but
that's the one Megan came. Yeah, the one Megan came down and did with me, right?
That's probably why, because the timing is perfect.
Yeah. So, she came. That's actually the first time I ever met her face to face was that race.
So that could be my first kind of build-up race.
Okay, yeah, because it's 6 or 12 and it's a 5-mile loop.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why she came down to do it. So
my goal this year is to try and run 100K in 12 hours. So if I don't get it this year, I might come down and try and do it in Florida.
Oh, that'd be great. You have to let us know. So we'll make sure.
And that could be your first build-up race too, John.
Yeah, and that's a free race. You know that, right?
Yeah. And is it? I didn't know that.
It's free.
Huh.
All you got to do is get there.
So you'll have that solid base of the Disney Marathon there. Try and start building up some distance. You'll be good.
Yeah, and hopefully about 50 pounds lighter by then. So we're working on it.
And if you carry a couple of pounds less water because you're fitter, there you go.
There you go.
See the game right there.
All works out.
There you go.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me, Karen. And Rob will be back next week.
Yeah.
If we can drag him back from Canada.
Yeah, I know. Man, he could have recorded from Canada. That's a pretty lame.
Well, he's out in the woods, fishing. So.
So he says.
They got internet up there.
In Canada, I don't think so. Do they even have things? I don't know.
I don't know. Once those tariffs came in, maybe we're charging them money for it. Sorry, I had to get it in.
They're all stuck up.
Gotta be careful. They'll attack.
The
Yeah, you gotta be careful. They'll attack us like they did in 1812, right?
Okay. On that note.
All right. We'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Endurance for Everyone podcast. If you have comments or questions for the show, send an email to teamE4E@enduranceforeveryone.com. And remember, Swim calm, bike strong, and run steady.